Often your goal in creating a worksheet has been to print it. Perhaps you want to take it to a meeting, perhaps you want to put it on a bulletin board. But before you print it, you want to consider such things as, do you want to print grid lines? Do you need a header or footer? Is this multi-page? Do you want it to fit onto one page? How about the orientation? Should it be across the paper? Should it be down the paper? These are the things we want to talk about as we talk about the print commands in Excel. You may recall in our worksheet that in the previous section we copied data, then we moved it. So Excel, you might say, does know that this information is here. If we're about to print, I strongly suggest that you don't just print without any consideration of what could happen. This button in the toolbar, in the standard toolbar, is called Print Preview. Now what happens? If we click on Print Preview, Excel looks throughout the worksheet for data. It assumes we want to print everything. That may not be what we really want, but at least the preview reminds us of that, and rather than having wasted a sheet of paper, we see on our screen here what our printout might look like. We are going to come back here and look at some of the choices. Let's choose Close now. And what I'm going to do is just get rid of the previous data that we created here. Remember a few ways to do this. One way is you can highlight this and hit the delete key. That's probably as fast as anything. So I do want to show you another way too. We don't need these rows here. We could click on the row numbers that contain this data, hit the right mouse button, and simply delete the rows. Scroll up and remind ourselves this is what we want to print. Click anywhere, go to the Print Preview, click, and we see what's in our preview. You probably don't want to print this worksheet this way. First of all, if you look closely, and we can zoom in, not all of the columns are here. We don't have an average. It's easy to zoom in here, and sure, there's a zoom button, but even easier, we can click anywhere here. You'll see the magnifying glass. We zoom in. Click again, zoom out. You should always look also at the bottom of the screen when you come to Print Preview. Left-hand side, notice how it says page 1 of 2. You might not have thought this would take 2 pages. We can look in this toolbar at the top here and see what the next page will look like. If we click there, you'll see there's only a single column out there. So this is really unsatisfactory. We can go back to the previous one. Nearly always, if you've chosen Print Preview and you see the result here, you want to make changes. That's where we come to the Setup button right here, Setup. Notice there are 4 tabs, a lot of things to do here, but many of them are straightforward. First choice here is orientation. Do you want the information to be printed across the paper this way? Perhaps. How about landscape? Sideways. Now, it could be that that's the only change you wanted to make. Let's just click OK, see how things look. It occupies a very small portion of the paper, but if you look in the lower left corner of your screen, it does say page 1 of 1, so you can make the case for saying, well, at least I want it to be landscape, but I would like it to be bigger, perhaps. And I may want to change some other things, too, maybe grid lines. So we go back to Setup. If this were larger than a sheet of paper, we could choose this option that will fit it to 1 page by 1 page, but we don't have that problem. We'd like to expand it a bit. We don't know exactly. We could say adjust to. Now, how much bigger do we need to make it? 125 maybe? I'm clicking on the up arrow here. That's a guess. Let's see what it looks like. Click on OK. It does fit. If we used a larger number, we'd be getting close to the possibilities here. It might go into a second page. So let's say that's what we want to choose. Let's go back to Setup and consider some other options. The choice here called Margins. You could use this to allow more space on the left-hand side. You could change this to be a half an inch on the left and on the right. Depending upon the nature of the worksheet you're trying to print, these numbers are easily changed. It makes the margin larger or smaller as you click on the numbers. You want to center this left-right on the page. Horizontally is the choice, and you watch the image here as I click and unclick horizontally. You see how it shifts. Would you want to center it top-bottom? That's vertically. Those are possible choices. Let's click OK and see how that's looking. More like this. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is the fact that This worksheet is considerably wider than it is tall, and it's just not going to fit this paper in an ideal way, maybe. But it certainly isn't bad looking. Let's go back to setup and consider a few more things. We looked at page, we looked at margins. Header footer has some choices in it. This feature is usually more pertinent if you have multi-page output, because certainly one of the things you'd like to do is to provide page numbering, usually in the footer. But you can use a standard header. If I click on the down arrow here, you will see some choices, and these will be keyed to your organization. Some of them will contain sheet names, some of them will contain file names, so there will be a variety, many different choices here, let's say, set up for you already. And you could choose one of these, or possibly just choose none. In other words, you don't need to have a header, but it's a possibility. Same thing with a footer. There are some standard built-in choices. I'll use just one of them. Page 1 of, notice the question mark. If it were multi-page, it would know the total number of pages and print it properly. So this particular tab here isn't that important in this example. Take a look at sheet here. Do we want grid lines? Well, maybe. Yeah, that might be nice. Do we want row and column headings? Usually not in a final presentation, but if it's for your work purposes, you would want to see perhaps the column letters A, B, C, D across the top, 1, 2, 3, 4 row numbers down the left-hand side. I'll choose that just to show you what it would look like. Let's click OK and see what we've got. Once again, a lot of personal choice here. Maybe you like the grid lines, maybe not. Maybe you want the column letters and row numbers. But at some point, after refining your choices through the setup command, you would probably print from here. Now keep in mind, it may be one of those situations where you say, well, I'd like to make my columns narrower and put in some more information. If the content needs to be changed, you need to close and go back to your worksheet and make changes there. It's almost as if you're at the photographer's and you've got a negative here and you can kind of stretch it and shape it, but you can't really change its content. So if you, for example, want to leave off column I, or you want to show less of this, you do close and go back and do other things with your workbook. So once again, print preview is highly recommended. You see the preview. Notice the footing at the bottom, and you can click in on it to zoom in, click on it to zoom, click on it to zoom out. There are a number of things you can do to refine the appearance of this. Suppose we wanted to print this information, but let's